The models do not lie, and right now every major forecasting system on the planet is pointing at the same thing. A climate event of historic proportions is locking its grip on the United States, and it is moving faster than anyone predicted even 60 days ago. As of June 19th, the NOAA Climate Prediction Center has issued an official El Niño Advisory. That is not a watch. That is not a possibility. El Niño conditions are present, right now, in the tropical Pacific. And what happens next is what every American needs to understand before this summer goes any further. In today's video, I am breaking down exactly what this means for your summer. I am walking you through the short-term severe weather threat building right now across the plains in the Midwest. I am giving you a full 7-day outlook with specific dates and specific cities. I am going to show you the jet stream pattern that is about to lock in across this entire country. And then, because this is where the story gets very serious, I am going to walk you through what a potential Super El Niño means for your temperatures, your drought risk, your wildfire threat, and your hurricane season. All of it. Data first. Let us get into it. My name is Arthur and you are watching Sky Space Lab, the channel that goes deeper than the headlines and gives you the science behind what is happening right now. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. New episodes go up every single day. I want you informed before the next system develops, not after. And with what is building right now across this country, that has never mattered more. Let us get into the data. Before I do, I want to take just a moment to say something about where we are as a country right now in terms of weather awareness. The past several weeks have been relentless. Tornado outbreaks, derecho events, flooding, heat. It has been one system after another. I hear from many of you in the comments who feel like you cannot catch a break. That is real, and it is not your imagination. The data shows that this stretch of persistent severe weather across the central and southern United States has been above average in frequency and intensity. This is exactly why I am here every single day. Because you need consistent data-driven information, not panic, not clickbait, so that you can make real decisions for your family. That is the mission here at Sky Space Lab, and it is not changing no matter what the pattern throws at us. Here is where things stand this morning, June 19th. The severe weather threat across the central United States is not over, not even close. We have a pattern in place that is producing round after round of dangerous thunderstorms, and today is another one of those days. The Storm Prediction Center has outlined a risk corridor from the Central Plains down through the Texas Panhandle and into portions of New Mexico. The main concerns today are damaging wind gusts, large hail, and an isolated tornado threat across South Dakota, Nebraska, and extending into parts of eastern Colorado. Let me be specific about who needs to be watching this most closely right now. If you live near Rapid City, Sioux Falls, or anywhere across central and western South Dakota, you are in the most critical zone for this afternoon and evening. The latest GFS run is showing discrete supercell development beginning as early as 2 to 3 in the afternoon local time. These storms are capable of producing tornadoes, and I would not rule out a strong tornado, EF2 or higher, in this environment before the evening upscale. Farther south, the panhandle of Texas into southeastern Colorado is watching for another round of large hail. Hail up to 2 inches in diameter, that is baseball approaching softball size, is possible with the most intense cells. If you are in Amarillo, Lubbock, or the surrounding communities, that is your primary threat today. Now here is something I want you to understand about this severe weather pattern and why it keeps repeating. This is not random. This is directly tied to the larger atmospheric setup that El Niño is beginning to drive across North America. Right now, we have a pronounced omega block in place across the mid-levels of the atmosphere. That means we have high pressure anchored over the southern plains acting like a wall. Energy comes screaming around that wall from the west, and it drops down across the northern and central plains every single day. That is why Sioux Falls has been on alert for what feels like weeks on end. That is why the Dakotas keep showing up on every severe weather outlook. The jet stream is funneling instability into the same corridor over and over again, and that corridor runs right through the heart of Tornado Alley. For tonight, those supercells across the Dakotas and Nebraska will likely upscale into a line of thunderstorms as the low-level jet strengthens after sunset. The primary threat shifts from tornadoes to widespread damaging winds in the 60 to 75 miles per hour range from Sioux Falls northeast into southern Minnesota by midnight. Do not let your guard down just because the tornado sirens have been quiet. The wind threat in nocturnal mesoscale convective systems is significant and catches people off guard every single time. I want you monitoring conditions across southwestern Minnesota and northwestern Iowa through the overnight hours tonight. And I want to address something directly that I have been seeing in the comments. Some of you are asking, is this the new normal? Is every day going to be a severe weather day from now until fall? The answer is not exactly. But we are in a stretch where the atmospheric pattern is genuinely favourable for repeated severe weather, and El Nino is amplifying that pattern in ways that will make this summer different from what most of us have experienced in years. Stay with me, because I am going to explain exactly how. Tomorrow, June 20th, the severe weather threat continues, but the focus shifts slightly. The central threat zone will be across the central Dakotas into northern Nebraska and extending into portions of Montana and Wyoming. Another batch of discrete supercells is possible near Mobridge and west of Aberdeen by mid-afternoon. If those storms remain discrete before upscaling, the tornado threat will be elevated once again. The atmospheric environment is very similar to what we have seen all week: strong directional wind shear, adequate moisture, and enough mid-level instability to support rotating updrafts. Significant hail will be on the table across most of this zone. Aberdeen, Bismarck, and the Mobridge corridor are the locations I am watching the most closely for tomorrow afternoon and evening. If you live anywhere in that area, have your plan ready before you go to bed tonight. Here is your full 7-day outlook. Day by day, specific dates, no vague language. Saturday, June 21st. The severe weather threat begins migrating eastward as that central low-pressure system finally starts making progress. The Midwest comes into play for the first time this week. I am watching a broad area from Iowa and Illinois back into Missouri and Kansas for scattered severe storms in the afternoon and evening hours. The tornado risk on Saturday is lower than what we have been seeing across the plains this week, but the hail and wind threat are very real. This is the day I want people in Des Moines, Kansas City, Springfield, and Chicago to start paying close attention. The storms will be faster moving on Saturday, which limits the flooding risk somewhat, but keeps the wind threat elevated through the evening hours. Sunday, June 22nd. The low pressure crosses the Great Lakes region. Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan come into the picture for the first time in quite a while. These are states that have seen surprisingly little severe weather over the past 30 to 40 days. That quiet period ends here. Scattered severe storms are possible from Indianapolis eastward through Columbus and into Cleveland by Sunday afternoon and evening. Large hail and damaging winds are the primary concerns. If you live in any of those metro areas, this is the day to have your weather apps open and your shelter location identified. I also want to include the southern shores of Lake Erie and Lake Michigan. Storms tracking northeast across the lakes can sometimes intensify briefly as they approach the shoreline. Monday, June 23rd and Tuesday, June 24th. Here is the window I want you to pay the absolute most attention to. The pattern reloads completely. Another trough drops out of the Pacific Northwest entirely independent of the system we just tracked. This is brand new atmospheric energy rotating into the country, and with the southwesterly flow re-establishing across Texas, Oklahoma and Arkansas, we are looking at another enhanced severe weather threat from the Central Plains back into the Ozarks. The European Ensemble and the GFS have both been pointing at this window for several days, and they are coming into much better agreement on both the timing and the intensity. I think Monday and Tuesday of next week could be some of the more organised severe weather days we have seen in weeks across this part of the country. Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, and northwestern Arkansas. Mark those dates on your calendar. Wednesday, June 25th through Thursday, June 26th. The severe weather threat expands back across the Great Plains with large-scale forcing getting more organised. If the timing works out the way the European Ensemble is currently suggesting, we could be looking at multiple rounds of supercells across Kansas, Nebraska, and Oklahoma before that energy dives into a broader linear system later in the period. I am also watching carefully for a significant derecho threat somewhere in this window. When the southwesterly flow gets this organised and you have that much instability loaded up from Texas all the way to South Dakota, you create the potential for a fast-moving, damaging wind event that can race 500 to 800 miles in just 12 to 14 hours. I am not saying that is guaranteed, but the environment will be favourable and I will be tracking it around the clock. Friday, June 27th. Rainfall totals across the Midwest will be significant by this point in the week. Areas from Grand Forks down through Fargo, Sioux Falls and into Omaha could be looking at 3 to 5 inches of total accumulated rainfall across this 7-day stretch. That is going to help with drought conditions across the northern plains and upper Midwest, but it also creates a serious flash flooding concern for areas that have already been saturated earlier this week. Low-lying areas near the Platte River, the James River, and smaller drainage basins across the Dakotas need to be paying attention to this. There is going to be rain this week that falls faster than the ground can absorb it. Have a plan for that. By late June 27th, there are signs in the Ensemble data that the pattern begins to relax slightly as the next ridge of high pressure builds southward out of Western Canada. But here is where the story takes a significant turn, because that ridge is the beginning of something much larger. Now let me step back and give you the big picture. Because everything I just described, every supercell, every derecho threat, every flooding concern, is happening inside a weather pattern that is about to fundamentally change for the entire country. And the engine driving that change is El Nino. Most people think of El Nino as a winter phenomenon, something that alters your ski season, something that makes California wetter. That is not wrong, but it is deeply incomplete. An El Nino of the magnitude that is now confirmed and accelerating does not just reshape your winter, it reshapes your entire climate experience from right now through the following spring. And what we are witnessing in June 2026 is the opening act of a multi-season atmospheric transformation that could rival anything in the modern instrumental record. Let me walk you through the mechanics, because I think it is important that you understand why this is happening, not just what is happening. El Nino is defined by warmer than normal sea surface temperatures in the central and eastern tropical Pacific Ocean. Right now, the Nino 3.4 region, the benchmark measurement zone in the equatorial Pacific between 5 degrees north and 5 degrees south latitude, is running at a positive anomaly approaching moderate El Nino thresholds. But the most alarming signal is not at the surface, it is below the surface. NASA has detected a massive oceanic Kelvin wave, a pulse of extraordinarily warm water moving beneath the surface of the Pacific from west to east, that is now rising towards surface levels across the eastern Pacific. When that warm water fully surfaces over the coming weeks, it will act like a release valve. It will dramatically accelerate the surface warming of the Pacific and push what is already a developing El Nino toward potential Super El Nino strength at a remarkable pace. Here is the number that should get your full attention. Both ECMWF and the Bureau of Meteorology are projecting sea surface temperature anomalies in the equatorial Pacific reaching +3 degrees Celsius by late 2026. Some Ensemble members within both systems are pushing toward +4 degrees. If those projections verify, we are looking at one of the strongest El Nino events in the entire instrumental record, potentially surpassing the great events of 1997 and 2015, and rivaling the record-breaking catastrophic event of 1877 and 1878. The IRI at Columbia University currently assigns a 98% probability of El Nino conditions persisting through the winter of 2026 into 2027. The speed of this development has been stunning. ECMWF's probability tracker went from just 22% El Nino odds back in March to 80% by April to effectively 100% Super El Nino probability by late May. That rate of escalation was steeper than either the 1997 or 2015 build-ups. Both of those events went on to reshape global weather in profoundly dramatic ways for years afterward. So what does this actually mean for your daily life right now? The jet stream is already responding. The Pacific jet is strengthening and extending eastward across the central Pacific. That is causing a high-pressure ridge to build over the western United States, and that ridge is going to intensify through late June and into July. Right now, the hottest and most drought-stressed areas of the country are the west and northwest. Washington state is in its 4th consecutive year of statewide drought emergency with snowpack at roughly half of normal. Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Montana, and Oregon are all dealing with severe to exceptional drought conditions. That building ridge of high pressure is going to bake those regions through most of the summer with limited relief in sight. AccuWeather is specifically highlighting the Pacific Northwest, Northern California, the Great Basin, and the Central Rockies as the zones most likely to see the worst combination of extreme heat and elevated wildfire conditions this summer. The National Interagency Fire Center is already tracking elevated wildfire potential across the southern high plains and the southwest, with that risk projected to expand northward through June and into July. When you combine exceptional drought, Record warm soil temperatures, early snowmelt creating dry fuel, and a high-pressure dome that keeps clouds and rainfall away for weeks at a time, you get the conditions for catastrophic wildfire outbreaks. Right now, 61% of the lower 48 states are already in some form of drought. That number is not going to improve quickly. El Niño creates what some researchers call a wildfire paradox for the western United States. Wetter winters in some regions grow vegetation that becomes extreme wildfire fuel when summer drought arrives. Oregon in particular is facing what climatologist Daniel Swain has flagged as an especially elevated risk of major heat waves and fire weather events in the first half of this summer. For the rest of the country, El Niño's fingerprints are visible in a very different way. The enhanced Pacific jet is driving that southwesterly flow across the southern United States, pushing moisture and instability northward from the Gulf and from Mexico into the plains and Midwest. That is the root cause of the relentless severe weather we have been tracking. El Niño summers are not quiet summers for the Midwest. They are active ones, with a storm track that favours the Central Plains, the Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley on a repeating near-weekly cycle. Most channels are not showing you this part, but it matters. The CPC pattern analysis for this summer period shows a stationary setup developing, ridging over the west, troughing over the eastern half of the country, with an energetic storm track threading right through the middle. That means above normal precipitation for much of the central United States through at least the first half of summer. It means derecho and storm cluster threats on a near-weekly basis from South Dakota down through Missouri and into Kentucky. And it means the drought hole that has been gaping across Illinois, Indiana, Iowa and Wisconsin is about to start filling in, but filling in violently, with heavy precipitation events rather than gentle, steady rains. Here is something I want the Midwest to hear directly. Your severe weather season does not peak in April. It peaks in June, July, and August. After one of the quietest Mays on record for tornadoes and organised severe weather across Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan, the pattern is turning hard. The data confirms it. If you live in the Great Lakes states, the Ohio Valley, or the upper Midwest, your severe weather season is not behind you. It is directly in front of you. Review your shelter plan. Know where you go if a tornado warning is issued for your county. Make sure every member of your family knows it too. The updated Ensemble data from ECMWF's long-range forecast is also showing something important for the second half of June. A broader thermal ridge is expected to build across the southwest and the southern plains between June 25th and the end of the month. If that holds, and the models are quite confident it does, temperatures across Arizona, New Mexico, West Texas and the southern high plains will surge well above normal. The CPC probabilistic heat outlook shows at least a 20% chance of maximum temperatures exceeding 100 degrees along the Rio Grande Valley and in California's Central Valley, and 110 degrees in the Mojave Desert during this period. That is extreme and life-threatening heat. If you are in the southwest, this is the stretch to be completely prepared for. And speaking of heat and energy demand, what does this summer mean for your utility bills? It means they are going to be high. El Niño's influence on the Pacific jet stream is keeping the western United States under a heat dome for extended periods, while simultaneously pumping moisture and instability into the central states. Both patterns drive air conditioning demand through the roof. If you have not already contacted your utility company about summer assistance programs or budget billing options, this would be the week to do that. This summer will stress power grids in ways that are worth preparing for. I also want to touch on what El Niño means for precipitation patterns across the southern tier of the country. AccuWeather and the CPC both highlight the southern states, particularly Florida, the Gulf Coast, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama and South Georgia, as seeing above normal rainfall this summer. The subtropical jet is pumping deep moisture northward out of Mexico and the eastern Pacific on a nearly continuous basis. What that means practically is that Florida is already in its rainy season, and that rainy season is going to be an aggressive one. Afternoon thunderstorms will be routine through July and August. Flash flooding concerns will be elevated for areas with poor drainage. And for residents from Pensacola to Miami and up through the Georgia coast, the humidity is not going to let up for a long time. The dew points being forecast for late June and into July across the Gulf Coast states are going to be in the low to middle 70s. That is tropical air. That is the kind of humidity that makes 90 degrees feel like 115 degrees with the heat index factored in. Stay hydrated. Limit outdoor exposure during peak afternoon hours. check on neighbours and elderly family members who may not have adequate air conditioning. Before we wrap up, there is one more thing you need to know, and this is the part I have been building toward all video. The Atlantic hurricane season is officially underway. June 1st marked the start, and the debate about what kind of season this will be is one of the most interesting and genuinely uncertain scientific discussions I have seen in recent years. Let me give you the complete picture, because anyone giving you a simple, confident answer right now is not giving you the whole truth. On June 10th, Colorado State University released its updated 2026 Atlantic hurricane season forecast. CSU pioneered seasonal hurricane forecasting back in 1984 under the late Professor Bill Gray. Their June update was significant. They reduced their numbers substantially. They are now calling for 11 named storms, 5 hurricanes, and 2 major hurricanes of Category 3 or higher. That is well below the long-period average of 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. Accumulated cyclone energy, the metric that measures the total destructive potential of the entire season, is forecast at just 70. The long-period average is 123. That is a dramatic reduction. Why did CSU cut the numbers? El Nino. Their statement was direct. They now have growing confidence in a moderate to strong El Nino developing during the peak of hurricane season, August, September, and October. Wind shear is the enemy of hurricanes. It tears apart developing tropical systems before they can organize into anything meaningful. A strengthening El Nino flooding the Atlantic basin with upper-level wind shear is one of the most powerful natural suppressors of hurricane activity that exists in nature. NOAA is currently assigning a 98% probability of El Nino conditions persisting during the August through October peak of hurricane season. Those are extraordinary odds. What does that translate to in terms of your actual risk? CSU places the probability of at least one major hurricane making landfall anywhere on the continental United States coastline at just 24%, compared to the long-period average of 43%. For the Gulf Coast specifically, from the Florida Panhandle all the way to Brownsville, Texas, CSU gives a 14% probability versus a 27% historical average. The East Coast, including Peninsula Florida, sits at 11% probability versus a 21% average. The Caribbean sees a 26% chance of a major hurricane passage compared to a 47% average. Every single metric is pointing toward a dramatically below average season. But here is where I want to push back and give you the truly complete picture, because the meteorological community is not unanimous on this. The University of Arizona is forecasting 20 named storms for this season. Their core argument is that Atlantic sea surface temperatures remain near or slightly above average across key parts of the main development region, and warm Atlantic water can override El Nino shear in some scenarios. We saw exactly that dynamic play out in 2023 and 2024, when the Atlantic was so anomalously warm that it defied the expected El Nino suppression and produced active and damaging seasons. The same warm Atlantic Ocean temperatures are present right now. This is a real tension that forecasters are working through. What is the bottom line? This is one of the most genuinely uncertain hurricane season outlooks in recent memory. CSU says 11 named storms. The University of Arizona says 20. That is not a minor disagreement. The key variable, and most forecasters agree on this, is how quickly El Nino reaches strong to Super El Niño status. If it gets there by midsummer, the shear wins, and we likely get a quieter season. If the ramp-up is slower, there could be a meaningful window of activity during August and September before the shear fully dominates. What does that mean for you specifically? It means you absolutely do not drop your guard. CSU says it themselves. It only takes one hurricane to make landfall to make it a catastrophic season for communities in its path. If you live on the Gulf Coast, in Florida, or along the East Coast, finalize your hurricane preparations right now. Supplies, evacuation routes, important documents in waterproof storage, a family communication plan. Do all of it now while you have the time and the calm to do it properly. Do not wait for a tropical system to develop to start thinking about this. I am also watching the Gulf with particular interest through the next few weeks. Ensemble members from both the European model and the GFS have been repeatedly flagging potential tropical development in the Western Caribbean and the Southern Gulf during the late June and early July window. The Gulf water temperatures are above 30 degrees Celsius right now. Wind shear is expected to temporarily lower during this window as the upper level high shifts its position. Moisture wrapping in from the eastern Pacific via Central America adds another favourable ingredient. I am not forecasting a named storm, but when multiple model runs over multiple days keep flagging the same region, that is not noise. That is a signal worth tracking every single day. I will be updating you the moment the picture becomes clearer. Let me also give you this final piece of context on what a potential Super El Niño means on a planetary scale. The tropical Pacific Ocean is the primary engine of Earth's climate system. When you dramatically change the temperature of that engine, and we're talking about anomalies potentially not seen since the 19th century, you change weather patterns everywhere on the globe simultaneously. Europe sees altered pressure systems and unusual storminess. Australia and Southeast Asia face severe drought. The Indian monsoon is disrupted. South America gets flooding events of historic scale. And here in the United States, the cascading effects go well beyond the temperature and rainfall patterns I've already described to you today. Former NOAA Chief Scientist Ryan Maue has described the current El Niño trajectory as a code-red scenario for the global atmosphere. That phrase does not come lightly from someone with that background and that level of expertise. If the projections from ECMWF and the Bureau of Meteorology verify through late 2026, the impacts of this event will be felt not just through the rest of this year, but well into 2027 and potentially beyond. The 2026 summer is not a normal summer. Every single data point confirms that. The question is not whether El Niño will impact your weather this year. It already is. The question is how strong it gets, how fast, and whether the atmosphere responds in the ways the models are now consistently projecting. I am going to be watching this every single day and bringing you the very latest as it develops. Here is what I want you to do after this video. Check on your severe weather action plan today, especially if you are in the Midwest or the Plains. Know your shelter location. Know the difference between a watch and a warning. If you live in the West, take the wildfire risks seriously right now. The fuel, the drought, and the heat are all aligned in a dangerous and worsening way. If you live on the Gulf Coast or in Florida, finalize your hurricane preparation plan before July arrives, and share this video with someone who needs to understand what is building this summer. The more people who have this information ahead of time, the better prepared our communities will be when the weather demands it. Drop a comment below right now and tell me two things. First, where are you located, and what threat concerns you the most heading into the rest of this summer? Is it the extreme heat building in the West? The drought? The severe storm threat across the Midwest and Plains? Or is it the tropics and what might be developing in the Gulf? Second, how prepared do you feel for the rest of this summer given everything I just walked you through? I read every single comment and I genuinely want to hear from you. These conversations matter, and they help me understand what topics to prioritize in future videos. Tomorrow I am going to be tracking the severe weather setup across the Midwest very closely, as a new system rotates in from the Pacific Northwest. I will also have updated model data on the tropical development window I flagged for the Gulf region tonight. That is going to be a critical update you do not want to miss. Make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on. I will see you in the next one. Stay weather aware, stay prepared. This is one of the most consequential summers for American weather in a very long time, and I am going to be here every single day, breaking it down for you with the latest data. Stay safe out there.